So good morning, everyone. If you're in the HP session for Lync Server 2013 Skype for Business, the 5,000 user reference architecture session, you're in the right place. We had about 345 people showed up, so, they put out a lot of extra chairs, it looks like. So we're going to be sharing three different speakers covering different portions of the session. I have myself that'll be covering the Lync lab configuration and some of the technical details with the testing. We have Jan that'll be doing some of the overview, some of the why we do this, how we do this, the teams that are involved in doing this, and then we also have Scott Koster, who is our resident SDN expert. So if you have questions afterwards, feel free to come up and grab one of us, or you can go to the booth. We also have Don Wilson in back, who he's raising his hand. He can certainly set up a follow-on session where you can ask any additional questions or see what we're going to be doing with our projects next. So with that, we'll hand it over to Jan to...
Thanks, Kevin. Good morning. As Kevin said, my name's Jan. I'm Jan Kelly. I work at HP for the Global Microsoft Alliance team. So one of our efforts at HP is to bring forth one solution from HP, take a look at Lync holistically for the whole company. And so we kind of have a team that has, Scott's a member, Kevin's a member, we have several other members to kind of bring all the expertise together and develop kind of an overall Lync or Skype for Business solution for HP. And in that effort, we gain a whole lot of experience in doing that. So what we'd like to tell you today, and before I start and do a quick review of the agenda, just a reminder, this is a level 300 technical session. So if anybody, we did our best to extract anything that was sales or marketing out of this presentation. so thank you. So if anybody wants to actually talk about products or talk to anyone in sales, booth 601, we're quite obvious when you go into the expo hall, so you can have that conversation there in the booth. So please feel free to drop by the booth if you have needs beyond what we're talking about today. Anyway, so what we want to tell you today, first of all, the scope of the project. And that's pretty much, this is an ongoing program at HP. We're about to release a reference architecture for 5,000 users, which is what we're talking about today. But we had done one for 2,500 users that was for more the channel market and lower-end pilots. This will continue. As immediately when we all leave here, we start retooling the lab for a Skype for Business. So we're going to migrate it from Lync 2013 to Skype for Business. So the project is, again, it's ongoing. What it's targeted at, so we'll talk a little bit about that, why we're doing it and what we're doing. This is intended for customers who may be doing, customers or partners who are working with the on-premise aspect of Skype for Business or Lync. So it's not, we do have a managed services organization who does that thing. This is not what we're addressing today. We're really looking to, you guys need to roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, and what we learned about an on-premise deployment. And so we're going to talk about, first of all, what led to doing this and the criteria, what it is and what it isn't. Reference architectures, also the solution, what's in the solution, why we put it together, and what we decided to test. So what did we test, what's in the lab, so we'll go over that. Kevin will talk in detail about what's in that lab. Also, then we'll add SDN to the mix. So we started with designing the servers and the whole server architecture, so let's add SDN in the mix and see what that does and how that affects it. After all that, after going through the server environment, the network environment, then we'll take a look at, after intensive testing, what were the results we saw, what were the conclusions we figured out, and also what were some of the best practices that we could recommend. And at the end, just a summary, has some links for further information, pointers to eventually the white paper we'll have about this for a deeper dive. Obviously, you can only cover so much in a 60 to 75-minute session, technically, so we've got pointers to additional information. And also, at the tail end, time permitting, a little bit about future products, where we're going next, and also we'd like to hear from you. What kinds of things do you think would be useful to know? What are the things you're looking at in the real world as far as your own deployment, whether you're an IT professional or you're with a partner? What else could we do that would make sense for you to see? So let me go to the next one. Just a little bit of background. Why do we even do these in the first place? Okay, we decided we needed reference architectures. We've had a long history with this, and one of the constant requests we get, or continuing requests, is can you do an appliance? Can you do a Lync appliance so we can just roll in and plug in and make it easy for the customer? Very common sales request. So we actually did something like that several years ago. It was close to appliance. It was a pre-tested, pre-rack system that you could order and roll that in, and pretty much with some minor configuration have that up and running. What these are not that appliance. Because what we learned, the lesson we learned with that was that even though there was a whole bunch of great testing and information that went into that appliance, what happened was nobody bought it. So they liked the information that went into it, and they bought it, but then they took that appliance or that rack system, and from there they configured it custom for each customer. Each customer had their own custom requirements. Maybe they had a higher ratio of voice and video. They were doing video conferencing. Maybe they had some archiving application and they wanted to do more. They needed more storage. So it's almost like there's this holy grail of one size fits all with Lync or Skype for Business, which we're finding is very difficult to kind of achieve. So we said, what's the more useful thing for you out there to use? How about let's pick something based on what we see, kind of common thing we see a lot of our customers using. Let's define that, test that, go exhaustively through all the results and show you what we learned, and then give you that information so you have a starting point. So we thought that would be a little more, let's share our expertise with you, not kind of tell you what you should be installing. So what we did, so with that in mind, a couple of years ago, we said, okay, what are the customer requirements we're seeing? What are they asking us for, and why do we need to spend time doing this in the first place? One of them, obviously, expedite our time to production. Every time I go to a customer, I don't want to start from scratch, have the Lync conversation, and decide what to build and how to build it. Give me a starting point so you can accelerate what I'm doing. Reduce deployment risk. With a pre-tested configuration, obviously, a lot of things, you don't want to learn these things when you're in the deployment part of your project or the deployment phase. You kind of want to know them ahead of time. Also, cost-effective platform. The advantage and benefit of doing this in the lab is we can pick a configuration that our team agrees on, test it. If we think we can tune it up or tune it down, we'll do that in the lab. So at least we have kind of a right-sized configuration, not something that's over-engineered, which you tend to do when you run out of time. Quality of experience, again, whole thing around accelerating adoption, accelerating deployment, get the deployments moving, get the adoption moving, anything that will accelerate that phase and speed it up. So what were some of the project requirements to do that we saw? And this is internally, since obviously HP has a large team or couple teams or multiple teams that do deployments for our own customers. What we were seeing from our deployment consultants was simplify the design stage. Give me these pre-tested things, so again, just like a customer might want a starting point, our own consultants wanted a good starting point. Give me that known thing, but give me the flexibility out the back end. Also, please test it and optimize it in the lab first. And then, again, we want the same thing when we define and spec out a project. We want a consistent deployment experience. Let's, again, minimize our own risk when we're delivering a project. So that was kind of the criteria why we got into this in the first place. A little bit about where's HP coming from? Where did we get this information? We didn't just sit down with a Microsoft white paper and put it together. Internally at HP, we have years of deployment experience. Lots of customers, obviously, and we've been in this before Lync was even Lync or OCS. We go way back to the OCS and live meeting days. We've been obviously doing a lot of this, so we have the technical experience in-house. Not only that, spent a lot of time, especially with the prevalence of enterprise voice and a lot of the voice technology used in these deployments. We actually spent years and years working with telcos, putting together their own backbones for their own systems. So suffice it to say, we had a lot of experience to pull from. And again, beyond just Lync, telephony and VoIP, everything we needed to put this together. And then not only was it our own pool of people we could draw from their expertise, we also have our own internal deployment. So we have a very large deployment at HP, and our consultants work hand in hand with HP IT department, and it was kind of a joint effort to design our internal deployment. Go from the right mice. So let me go on one quick. A little bit about our internal deployment. Today, as it stands, and it's been true for a while, HP IT is Microsoft's largest Lync customer. 410,000 users. So obviously in something that size, you deal with massive issues and massive considerations to have to get that kind of thing up and working. And so we deliver, and again, it's full IM presence peer-to-peer. It's enterprise voice. It's everything, and we did roll that out kind of in a measured way. Important thing to know, there's a lot of talk from Microsoft about adoption, not just deployment, but how are users adopting. One of the interesting things we did at HP to force people to actually use, we call it PC phone internally, but the Lync voice capability or enterprise voice, we just took the phones off the desks. So gave them recommended headsets, told them what they could use, told them about that experience, made it easy for them to get them, buy them, or obtain them, and took the phones away. And it really sped up adoption quite quickly. So anyway, large. And another thing, too, rather than go through all the detail on this, another thing to know, our Lync conferencing, which replaced Intercall and some of the other things. We had our own internal HP team application. That's all gone away, replaced with Lync conferencing. We do that. And we are bigger than the next largest 3 Lync conferencing deployments at Microsoft. So suffice it to say, we're huge. Another interesting thing for the voice, what we did to get experience is, as a temporary thing, HPIT broke off the Lync team, put them under Global Telecom at HP. So they worked together to design the whole back-end voice network. So we gained a lot of good experience from that. So once that was done, had efficiencies of scale, got everything working, then they went back out. The Lync team went back under our regular HPIT group. So because networking is so important, that was just a move on our part that would ensure that this would get done correctly with the right people involved. And again, we also, as I say, there's some crossover. Our own internal deployment was used as a model for one of our largest managed services offerings. So we have managed services that we do offer modeled after this. So we learned in-house, dog-fooded it, and then turned it into an offering. And with that, that's kind of just an overview of why we did this, what we know, and what information and knowledge we brought to bear. And with that, I want to go into the next step where Kevin can go through, since he's in the team that actually gets his hands dirty and sits in the lab and manages this, tell him what's in the lab, why we put it there, and what some of our criteria was. So you can walk through that. Kevin? Great, thanks.
One of the things that was kind of amazing that Jan didn't really hit, we have saved enough money on our entire deployment of Lync by switching over from telco long distance, productivity minutes, things like it used to take us when we were logging into virtual classrooms, it would take us about 45 seconds to, dial the phone, get the phone call connected, go in, hook up to the application sharing, and then start the conference call. We dropped that down to the Outlook reminder pops up, you click on Join Online, and you go. So that's been a huge savings to HP just in productivity gained back. It gives you time to run down the hall, grab a coffee or whatever instead of trying to log in. So, it's been something that's very important to HP to be able to have that experience kind of globally for all of our customers. And we did roll it out on an office-by-office basis. Obviously, with a pool only scaling up to about 80,000 users, we have lots of pools. So when we started putting together the solution design for the Lync reference architectures, we take people like, from Scott's team that know networking really well. We take our TS consulting folks who are out there doing deployments day in and day out. We take, all of these experts from servers, storage, every business unit that we have. We bring them together. We also talk to channel partners, customers, and we try and blend all of that together into solutions that we believe hit a good percentage of what our customers would be looking for and have the feature availability that they want. So one of the things that we did was a 2,500 user virtualized RA. So we put everything on as few resources as possible. You can go out, download that white paper. This is kind of the next in the series of that. So on this one, we wanted to go with a purely physical environment. We wanted to do HA. So, there was a blog post or a white paper that came out recently on the difference between HA and DR. So when I say HA, we're talking, within a single site, not DR, where you'd extend that out to multiple sites and have the ability to fail over. We wanted it to be the on-premise part. We are kind of playing around with the whole, connecting up to hybrid. We're doing some stuff with Exchange around connecting into hybrid and doing some testing on that. Haven't quite gotten there with Lync. And then SDN came out. So we really wanted to see what was the impact of SDN on being able to plug that into an environment. And, did we see an increase on load on the servers just by turning SDN on, or did we see that there was really no difference and it was able to help out in bad network situations? And Scott's going to go into, more depth on how that whole SDN piece works. So typically what we'll end up with is 2 white papers or, a couple different things. We'll end up with a white paper that describes the testing results, and that's coming out soon, as Jan mentioned. And then we'll also have a companion kind of network piece, because what we can test in the lab is kind of bounded by that one data center. We don't have 10,000 users across the world that we can have coming in from all these different branch sites using real Lync clients. So we put it all in one data center, and we look at it from that perspective. So we did a single site with high availability. We followed the Microsoft best practices. So for things like 5,000 users, we were able to do 2,500 on a single virtualized server. With 5,000, we jumped up to 13 servers. That's a pretty huge jump to go from one server for 2,500 to 13 servers for 5,000 users. A lot of the reason for the high server count is separating out the roles so that we have discrete pools for the different functionality, so that in the event that you do lose something, you have the ability to have another server there that can come in and take the place of that. So when we tested this, we were doing IM and presence, enterprise voice, video, application sharing, the normal workloads. And I do see a lot of you are taking pictures of the screen. If you want, this is actually uploaded onto the Yammer second screen experience, and you can just download a copy of this deck right from that, and you can have the whole thing. Plus, I think it'll be also done on Channel 9 at some point. One of the things that we did not test was reverse proxy. We'll get to that in a minute. When we started the testing, the Gen 8 platforms from HP were the ones that were currently out, so that was cutting edge at the time. We now have the Gen 9 platforms out, similar sizing, a little bit more horsepower, a little bit different feature set. So you can swap those fairly, pick a processor that's about equal across the 2 different lines and be in the same thing. When we did the PSTN piece of that, we used MSR 5060. So what we do is we have a PSTN simulator that hangs off of that simulates a portion of the calls, and we'll get into a little bit more of what it actually looks like. But we have bulk calls that are generated off that PSTN simulator, as well as the Microsoft Lync stress and performance tool. So here, just kind of an overview of what we've got here. We did not put in this particular RA any of the firewalls or the reverse proxy. So we did use DNS for load balancing. We are looking in future projects about dropping in full load balancing so that we can do all of the web workloads and make sure that, we're able to do, with an F5 or a KEMP or whoever the particular vendor that we happen to have available in the lab at that point. Originally, we were testing the Lync Edge server, web apps, monitoring, the director, persistent chat, and the front-end servers, as well as a mirrored back-end SQL pair. We later in the project added the SDN component, which consisted of the Microsoft SDN Manager, as well as the HP VAN controller with the network optimizer application. And to further break that out a little bit more, and Scott was really instrumental in helping us kind of get all these pieces working together, we set this up so that we could have a 3800 switch on one side of the core switch here. So if you start in the middle, we have a core switch. And OpenFlow is not required on that switch for SDN to work. The 3800 switches both have SDN enabled. They're running a version of firmware that allows SDN to work, actually OpenFlow to work with them and communicate with the SDN environment. So on the left-hand side, we have kind of most of the data center-like functionality. We have the front-end server pool, which consists of 3 front ends: persistent chat, the Office web apps, stress and performance tool. Now this is what's simulating the UC to UC type of the workload. We also have the directory server and the back-end SQL Server and Mirror. This was all deployed on VLAN 10. So we were using 10 dot address spaces for that to make that simple. When we put the SDN infrastructure in place, we tied these 2 switches together using LACP trunks. So the LACP trunk that you see here on this side on the left has VLAN 20, which goes over as control for this 3800 switch, as well as VLAN 10, which is what all of the servers and the simulator clients are linked into. On this side over here, we have the VLAN 30, VLAN 20, and VLAN 10. The 20 is for the switch and the SDN VAN controller. We have the 30, which simulates the edge servers, and we actually have a separate stress and performance tool server that's simulating the external calls in. We drop in another stress and performance server that's dedicated just to doing the PSTN workload from Microsoft, because the way that we have this configured, we were only able to generate just a little bit under 50 calls coming off of our Architect Immutel PSTN simulator. So, as I said, we ended up with 13 servers. So that was our kind of original design. When we added SDN into the mix, we picked up an additional 4 servers. The 4 servers consisted of the VAN controller that sits on VLAN 20 that kind of talks to all the switches and manages what's happening there. And then we have the 3 additional SDN manager servers that talk to the Lync front end that has the SDN API loaded onto it. We were using all up-to-date versions of the APIs, whatever the most recent available Windows Update versions were. So as I said, we did this on the Gen 8s. One of the features of the Gen 8s, you can do small form factor, you can do large form factor drives. Here we have a 1U, we have a 2U. You can go up to 25 drives with the 380 Gen 8, and then you can, pretty much pick out what you need. On the network, we stuck with the 1 gig LOMs. We weren't really hitting the network very hard. While we have the opportunity to go with the 10 gig, we just didn't see the utilization. So we chose to go with a 4-port, and the LOM is a kind of a daughter card that plugs in, so you're not consuming any PCI slots. So for the core switch, as we mentioned before, we have the 10508. That's connected to 2 of the 3800 switches, which are OpenFlow compatible. And then we have the MSR, which is the multi-services router, and that's what connects out to our PSTN environment. So we've pretty much covered most of this. We'll just dig in a little bit more deeply here. So we have a mirrored SQL. And when you look at the diagrams, you'll notice that down here we say the archiving and monitoring database, persistent chat compliance database. So we co-located all of the databases in this infrastructure on a single set of SQL servers. We didn't split them out across multiple ones because we were kind of going back and forth when we were doing the sizing on what's a good balance, and we didn't want to end up with even more servers out there as we split off databases for everything else. So here where you see persistent chat, this is the equivalent of the front end role that's going to then talk to the persistent chat back in database over here. Similarly, we have, the mediation, archiving, and monitoring co-located on the front end pool. We did have 3 front end pools, which is Microsoft recommendation. And then we have, as I explained before, the different VLANs that run across. So, one of the things that we do is we will take a design like this, we'll run it through our sizer when we're getting ready to, put it together. We see what comes out of the sizer, then we go and talk to all of the teams that I mentioned before and get any additional recommendations. At the end of the project, where we're at now, we go back and we look at what results we got. Did we have any surprises, and do we need to go update the sizer with better guidance? So we did find, there were a couple of things where we're going to actually have the opportunity to end up tweaking the sizer with some of the results that we got from this. There are some tools from Microsoft with the Lync Server 2013, or the new Skype for Business tool set that will be coming out, as well as HP, and we're working on getting the next version of that available, which will be Skype for Business. So, we have a set of folks that we work with, and we have one guy named Arvind who's really, really busy. He works on the sizer, he works on testing the RAs, and I don't think he sleeps some of the time. So we try and fit in as many options as we can into each piece of the sizer and each different rev of the sizer. So as we go into the next one, we do take feedback, and if you do have feedback, if you have things that you'd like to see in the sizer, go download the sizer. There's a link in the sizer, and I'll show you where that link is here in a minute, to click on to send feedback. And we do pay attention to that. Every single one of the teams that's responsible for a sizer, whether it be Exchange, SharePoint, Lync, virtualization, that's actively monitored. So if you catch a bug, you see something, hey, I really want to be able to have it do this, virtualized Lync workload. Send the request. We would love to have more people reach out to us so that we can look at things that we can add into the sizer. And with that, let's jump over. And we have a demo of the sizer. So, kind of have to drive a little bit sideways here. As I mentioned, we have this Contact Us link, and when you click on that, it will pop up a Outlook mail that will give you the ability to pretty much say anything you want to say. Your sizer's great, it's terrible, didn't work for me, these are the areas that you need to fix, or I'd love to see you have this solution, and we will get back in touch with you. We have, that type of feedback. The reference architectures, as we release them, they go down here in this portion. So when you click on this, it will take you to a web page where you can download either the bill of materials, just showing kind of what's there for the 2,500 user RA, or once we release in the next week or so the 5,000 user RA, it'll give you that information, or you can go directly to the white paper and get that. And then here we have 2 different things. We have a saved workload or a saved solution. So a workload is what we would define as, the number of users that you have, how many central sites do you have, what's your branch site configuration look like, what's the workload look like, what features are you trying to put in place. A solution is, once you've put all that together, you've kind of clicked that finish button, that's going to generate a solution and you can save it. What's really nice about the sizer is you can go through it multiple times with a saved workload and go, I really don't want to use this particular processor. I don't want to use this particular server. I want to switch over to using Blades. I want to switch over to, you kind of, you load it up once and then you go, okay, this is going to cost me X number of dollars. Well, okay, the CFO's not really happy with that. Is there a way that I can adjust things? Can I co-locate more things? Can I move things around to make a better solution? So let's go ahead and we'll just start through here. We have welcome to the Sizer. I won't bore you with reading that. So here, as I mentioned, you can define central sites. If you don't like the one that we have put it in, you can certainly come in here and rename it, hit save, and then it's a little bit more personal to what you're looking for. And you can add multiple central sites. Here we start getting into how many users. So we were doing 5,000 user RA. So 5,000 users. Kind of our first piece that we need to check here is, hey, we're going to do Enterprise Edition because we're going to spread everything out so we can get the high availability piece. So then we have some ability to manipulate things. Microsoft has a published kind of standardized workload that they use that has a mix of things. And it's been that way for quite a while with Lync. There's not a lot of, fiddling where you can adjust things up and down. So you have a starting point that's similar to, kind of what you would see as a typical corporate user from what their feedback has been when they wrote the original workload tool. You do, however, have the ability to come in here and say, we're going to do high availability, as we talked about before. We do want to do monitoring. We do want archiving. We want to be able to have the Office web app so that, we can do PowerPoint sharing and somebody doesn't have to ask you to back up a slide because they can just click on it, back up a slide, see what they missed, and then go back forward again. Of course, we have remote users. Everybody loves working from home or Starbucks. We are going to add in the director role and mobility. And if you have a question about, hey, what's this thing mean? Click on the little information box and it's going to tell you what that particular setting is intended to do. So kind of a nice, just quick, you don't have to go look at a white paper or read the user manual. It gives you enough to be able to be up to speed and running fairly quickly. So we've got the basic, idea here laid out. Then we go next. So as you can see, some of these are kind of in a grayed out. That's that workload that I was talking about that's been predefined by Microsoft. So those percentages are pretty well, right now in the Sizer, we use that workload. As I said, our guy that does the Sizer, Arvind, he's one guy. There's only a certain amount of work that he can do in a day. So we're looking at in the future, if we get feedback from customers, adding the ability to go in there and adjust that a little bit better to what your workload is. So if that's something that's really important to you, please go download the tool, click on the Contact Us, and say, we'd really like to see this. And obviously, the more people that comment on things, the faster it gets prioritized up in the list. So here you have the ability to define your voice infrastructure. You can choose, we did E1 this time. A lot of these will have the option to either do Sizer recommendation or you can do a drop down and override it if you know what that setting is going to be in your particular environment. We do, of course, want to enable video. And we, of course, want to just make this the heaviest load that we can possibly make. So we'll click Next. So we come in here, and now we're starting to get an idea of what some of the co-location things look like. We also have a button over here on the left called Solution Preview, which, as you're going through this and you kind of want to know, where am I at? What if I didn't pick anything and I just at this point let the Sizer choose all of the things, what would I end up with? Click on that. It's going to give you the ability to see a preview of where you currently are to do kind of that what if type of thing that I mentioned. You can click on the thing, send it to your email, send it to your sales guy, say, hey, give me a quote on this. Kind of handy to have. We're going to leave, right now, we're going to leave hyperthreading turned on. Here we're going to co-locate the mediation servers, as we talked about, on the front-end servers. The databases, we're just going to pick one. Well, let's just make it, crazy on, the number of servers that we want to end up with. We did this a few times. We ran through. We're like, okay, wow, that's a lot of servers. And even we, when we're testing and we get a pretty good price on the servers, we don't have an unlimited budget, so we do have to kind of watch that. Here you can define branch sites. So branch sites can be a little bit different. You can have an SBA out there that's hanging off so that you have some survivability, but you got 25 users. How much of a Lync environment do you want to put in that particular office to be able to, make that work? So you can define that. Click Next. We give you in here the option of picking, you can split out and you can pick servers to your heart's content. You can either have one server configuration and make it apply to every single role that you're going to deploy. So every server is going to get the same basic type of thing. Where that comes in handy is if you've decided that you are going to do rack mount and you're going to standardize on a particular server. Let's just say that you're going to standardize on a DL380 because your procurement department, oh, that was interesting. So we're going to standardize on a DL380 and we'll just pick a Gen 9. Now you can go through, you can do this individually for every single thing out there. You can get as granular as you want. You can pick different storage types, whatever, makes you happy. And then click Next. You can apply the choice. If you do it by just default, it's going to apply the choice to everything. If you want to put this on external storage, you certainly have the capability of putting it on your SAN. Click that, tell it you want to do, iSCSI SAN, fiber channel SAN. We typically find with Lync, internal servers have plenty of storage. It's very low latency. There's not a lot of going and dealing with anybody outside of your group. So right now you notice we're at the point where we have a gray Next. This is where I typically will start the save the workload, or maybe one step back before I started picking all the servers, so that then I can come in and just tweak which servers I want to try out in that configuration. Once I click Finish, it goes through and it's going to calculate based on all of those different things that we've selected, match up with the Microsoft best practices, anything that we've found from our testing, and it's going to generate a configuration that meets the criteria that you've input. So this is kind of that what if piece where you've gone and you've changed something and you want to see what happens when you've changed that. So you switch servers, you switch processors, or what have you. So it's then going to, once the little Starbucks machine goes and the hamster gets all of its caffeine, it prints out a list that shows you for each server, what's the server type, how much memory is needed, what the disks are. And as you scroll down through this, you have storage configurations, for each server role. And then at the top here, you have the ability to save this. You can email it, you can display it, customize it further, you can add some SBAs, you can view it as a graphical representation of what things look like. So with that, I need to be respectful of your time and hand this back over to Scott, or hand this to Scott, and he can come up and, if we do this right, sure. So the sizer recommendation is based. Correct. It is, from the beginning, it's based on Microsoft recommendations. That's kind of our holy grail of what we use as the base foundation for the recommendation. But then if we find, like when I cover the test results section later, one of the things that we found is if we put all the databases on a single set of SQL servers, we needed more memory. That went over and above what the Microsoft recommendation was. So that's where it gets into that what if, and if you want to adjust things, that lessons learned, we will throw that back in the sizer to say, hey, another option was put all my databases on one pair of SQL servers. I'm going to need more memory than what the Microsoft calculation would tell me I needed.
Thank you, Kevin. So I've got a fun topic to talk about, and this is one of the reasons why that they added SDN into the 5K user reference architecture was it's impactful. It adds to the network. It adds to this solution. And this is something that HP's been working really hard on, is SDN and making the network better, making it easier, and adding value to Skype for Business and Lync. So one of the things we want to remember is that, don't forget about the network. The network is important to the success of Lync and Skype for Business. Is Lync and Skype for Business use TLS sessions to hide signaling. They use SRTP. This makes some of the network methods of looking into the packets challenging and hard. And DPI is an issue with networking. So what we've done is we've been working with Microsoft, and then we've come up with a lot of network recommendations around Skype for Business and Lync, and wireless. Wireless is another issue that is a challenge with Lync. The users are always mobile. They can be taking a meeting from the cafeteria. They can be taking a meeting from the hallway. They want to use their mobile phones. So this experience, we need to make sure that the users have the right capacity in the network, the right quality of service levels. And, this is important. And there's a statistic around how 60 to 80% of Skype for Business calls that are bad are due to the network. They're not due to anything with Skype for Business or the servers. It's the network. And so so there's traditional methods of managing this. There's lots of companies that make a lot of money going into businesses and doing network assessments. And it's a challenge. Doing good quality of service across an entire network is not easy, it's not trivial, and it takes time, effort, and you have to initiate consistent policies across the entire network, from campus to the core to the WAN edge. And so what we've done is, we've been looking at this, and HP Networking has come up with a solution for this. So we have an application called HP Network Optimizer. I'm going to call it Easy Mode for Quality of Service. So what we can do is with OpenFlow, SDN, collaboration with Microsoft, we can make this easy. We have a single pane of glass to where we can provide visibility to what is happening in the network. We can integrate with Active Directory. We can help provide users the control and make business decisions over who has the most priority access to the network. Is it your teachers, Or in a business context, is it the CEO? Is it yourself? Is it the help desk worker? Who gets the highest priority access to the network? And we can help provide answers to those business decisions around optimizing. So our SDN application has a powerful user interface. We can go in, we can make changes in the UI. We can enable quality of service here. We can do configuration. We can go in and set the quality levels, DSCP, markings, priorities, and make and help you diagnose problems from the network. We have a heat map tool that maps out every switch in the network. And this tool allows us to go in and help you diagnose where problems are in your network. So this could be, there's a WAN link that's bad, so all switches in a site are showing up as poor quality. And this is something that we can help you find fast. This allows the team that you're working with to address link problems and help your users out quicker, faster, and easier. And so next I'll go through a walkthrough of how this works with SDN and the whole solution. So here on the left we have, the Microsoft side of this, this Lync software stack, Active Directory. Over on the right we have HP, the network optimizer, and the controller, and then we have the switches and the servers that this rides on. So the first thing that happens, the users, James and Linda, place a call. They want to start talking. And so this goes, and then that triggers the Lync front-end servers to communicate with the Lync dialog listener, which communicates with the Lync SDN manager. And then the Lync SDN manager communicates with Network Optimizer. So Network Optimizer receives a message from the Lync SDN manager, and we can now we get information from Microsoft. So they're telling us, that you have a call. This is a voice call. It's being placed between James and Linda. This is their IP address for each user. Here's the TX and RX ports for this RTP stream. So this is important information that we need to go and make decisions and actions in the network. And then so what Network Optimizer does is we can go into the network and look up where these users are located. We can go into down all the way to the switch and find where these users are. This allows us to take action. And as you can see, these are located on 2 different switches. And now, so Network Optimizer is able to look up the policy of these users in this voice call. So it's a voice call, and they're going to get DSCP 46. So this is a standard diff-serve code point for voice, and we're going to apply an L2 priority of 5. So this is another priority access for this voice call for these users. And so next, what we're going to do is we're going to go put the OpenFlow rules into the switches. And so now the traffic is flowing through the network, and we can go in and look at the detail here. So this is actually what happens in the switch, and what we're seeing here is that there's a lot of detail, but the source and destination IP address are here. We have the UDP protocol for RTP, and then we have source and destination ports, and then there's some other information as well. And down at the bottom, it shows that there's DSCP values of 46, and the L2 priority of 5 are applied. And one of the interesting things to note is that with SDN, a lot of the action in the controller is due to the making flows and putting these on the switch. And so what we do is we have a timeout for idle of 60 seconds on every flow that Network Optimizer creates. And this timeout goes in, removes the flow automatically directly on the switch, and this allows us to increase the scalability of this solution. And so one of the next things we wanted to talk about is, where is SDN going? What is SDN about? And so, before we had this traditional world where networks did switching, networks did routing, and every switch acted independently. And then we're talking about this future over here on the right, where SDN is everywhere, everything is SDN. But that's going to be a long journey, and most switch hardware barely supports SDN protocols, barely has hardware support for significance here. And so this is going to be a long journey. So today, we are entering a hybrid SDN world. And what this really means is we can take the traditional switching and routing platforms, and we can add new functionality and new features and new things that weren't originally possible with SDN before. And so that is what's magical about this period. And this is based on just a couple simple rules in OpenFlow. So OpenFlow is a massive standard. There's a lot of things in it. But there are two critical components of OpenFlow that are not in many switches today, but are very critical to making hybrid mode work. So we have the OpenFlow flood port and OpenFlow normal port. So what forward normal means is this normal port is what we can do is we can do magic with OpenFlow. We can rewrite DSCP values. We can rewrite headers in the network. And then we can put it back into the switch to forward like a normal pipeline. So that traditional switch still works, and it still forwards traffic. But now we can do work on it, make changes, make the network better, and then put it back for normal processing. And so as you can see in our previous switch flow example, the forward normal rule is down there at the bottom. So we're changing the packet. We're rewriting this frame with DSCP values. And then we stick it back onto the switch to forward like normal. And so I'm going to switch over to a video. And so I recorded this a while back, and I'm getting over a cold, so I'll just let my voice on the recording do the talking for a few minutes.
Hello, everybody. This is a demo for the Skype for Business update to the HP Network Optimizer. So this is an application that HP has developed to work with Microsoft Lync to deliver dynamic quality of service. We have updated this for supporting Skype for Business, and this is an example of what it would look like. So right now I have configured the network to be a poor network, and you'll see why Fred and Sam are complaining about the quality of this network. We're going to go ahead and start a application sharing session with the desktop. We're going to go ahead and present this. We're going to go over here to Fred's station, and he will go ahead and accept the content from Sam. So this is using the Skype for Business client, and Sam's accepted the session, and it is not updating very fast. In fact, it's not really updating at all. We can go ahead and move this over here and see how it moves around, or the video. This is not a good user experience, and let's go check that. So we'll hop over to the Network Optimizer and see what the IT administrator can find out the problem. So you can go over here and look at this. This is the dashboard. It gives them a high-level view. For the most part, calls have been good. There's been a couple bad calls today. You can go over and look at the sessions, and you can look in here that there's an active session. This is the one that Sam and Fred are complaining about. Okay, so the flows are configured, so that's looks like it's working properly. So the SDN API for Microsoft is telling the HP VAN SDN controller and the network optimizer where the calls are being placed, and HP configures switches and add open flow rules to where we're setting the quality level of these calls. So let's go into the configuration and look at this a little more detail. Okay, so we figured out that application sharing was set to CS1 and an L2 priority of 1. Maybe the configurator of this figured that this was good, but in all reality, CS1 and 1 are below best effort, which is the background traffic that's congesting the link that Sam and Red are running this call over. So let's go ahead and fix this. We'll go ahead and bump this up to CS4. We'll give them an L2 priority of 4. And we can go ahead and hit apply. And this will dynamically change it. And we can see that this call is already vastly improved. And this is due to the magic of the Lync SDN API and SDN and OpenFlow, where we can go into the switches and reconfigure the call and provide a great user experience. And this all works now with the new updated Skype for Business. Thank you very much.
So one of the things we want to stress with SDN is that you can see it's important, and these are reasons why Kevin and the team have decided to include SDN in the 5K reference architecture. And so we want to leave you with is that, SDN is important, and there's a lot coming with SDN. And that you, if you're an application owner, you're going to be able to start directing the network. You're going to be able to help the network make business decisions that are important for your application. And that is what's important with SDN, is that we can start using applications to ask the network, I need to make an important call. This is the CEO that's making a call. And how best do we place this call? Do we go into the network and do we bump another user lower in priority so that the CEO has priority? Do we go and route a call over the PSTN because the WAN link's congested? This is something that this SDN phase and process is going to start allowing. So HP Networking has built a development ecosystem to enable partners, application developers, application owners, IT teams to create solutions for SDN to really enable the network to fulfill the needs of the business, help the network manage business priorities, and help the network allow applications to make the network better. And so next I'll hand it back to Kevin to go through a lot of the lessons learned throughout this solution.
Thank you, Scott. And since I took so much time earlier, we'll zip through this a little bit faster. So when we did the configuration in the lab, we wanted to test kind of a wide range of different things. So we set up 3 different sets of scenarios, numbered 1, 2, and 3. And then within those, we broke out an extra set where we added the UC to PSTN piece. So on scenario 1.1, we enabled 30% of our users for enterprise voice, kind of like, back in the Sizer where you had the ability to set a certain number of users that were going to use different features. When we got to the 2.0 sessions, we did 60% of the users were enabled for enterprise voice. And then the .2s, we added in that UC to PSTN on top of the UC to UC calls. When we get into the 3 dots, we started failing different things. So we failed the front-end servers. So, we just took one of the front-end servers, turned it off, see what happened, measure everything. what happens to the load. The second one, we killed one of our SQL servers off. You know, that's kind of always interesting to see. You're going to have to call the SQL server admin up and have him come fix something. And then the third one, we did a loss of an edge server. And all of the failure scenarios were done on the 60%, so the higher load. So, what were the top things that we learned? Front ends are critically important to your deployment. If you're going to look at right-sizing any one single role, make sure you've got enough horsepower on the front end. That's going to be by far the busiest thing that you are going to find in the entire environment. If you're kind of on the edge, add another front end. You can always decide, you know, it's working fine, I don't need it, I can take that back. With the SQL servers, as I mentioned earlier, when we ran through all those tools, we got a recommendation of 32 gig. Well, we found out in testing, because we happened in those servers to have 192 gig of RAM, that we were using 43 gig of RAM. So we needed to bump that up. And that'll be some of the feedback that goes back into the sizer. If you co-locate all of that onto a single set of SQL servers, you need to have additional RAM in there. For failover, in all of the scenarios, we had pretty good, utilization, but the front end was what was most affected. As Scott mentioned, we'd gotten through all of the testing, and we decided that SDN was really critically important to highlight. So we stopped, we backed up, we put SDN in place. We then re-baseline tested everything with SDN turned off but installed, and then turned it on and started having it actively manage traffic. And we found out that there was negligible difference in performance. So the SDN addition didn't really change or impact what we needed to have when we started installing that into the Lync servers. We did use DNS load balancing. As I mentioned before, future projects, we're going to look at adding in some hardware load balancing stuff, just so that we can see as we come in from those external sessions through the edge server, we can see the HTTP balancing going on. So as we, front-end servers here, most used resource. So, if you're going to spend extra time getting anything right, get the front end right. We did find that one interesting thing is we started playing around with the duration of the calls. And the default was set at 3 minutes. And, at HP we love to talk, so we always have 30-minute conference calls. And so we're like, oh, well, let's crank it up to 30 minutes and see what happened. Well, the CPU utilization went up to 85%. So, pay attention to those things that are happening in your specific environment, and then do that kind of, deploy and then monitor, deploy and monitor, because while SDN or something like that can really help you along, if you're really close to the edge, it might push you over the edge, and you just may not have enough resources to go around for everyone to have a great experience. And, you don't want your phone to ring any more than we want our phone to ring. And, HP with a large environment did struggle when we first did. We started out, I think, with virtual and then decided to do physical. And, so we played around with a bunch of different combinations to see what would work in our particular environment. We did find that on the SQL side, we had pretty good latencies. We were looking for under 100 milliseconds. And the results that we got, which will be in more detail in the white paper, stayed under 63 milliseconds. When we did the switch over and we failed a front-end server, we saw about a 12% increase in CPU. So, yeah, there was a hit, but not much of a hit. Now, if you combine that with this 30-minute call and, your CPU utilization was already at 85%, you're kind of, getting toward a cliff that you're about to fall off there. We looked on the user distribution when we start getting up into the 60% of the users enabled for enterprise voice. We did see about a 25% jump when we took one of the front ends out of rotation. So that was on our scenarios 1 and scenarios 2. So, kind of overall, about 10% per front end server is what we saw. About an extra 10 gig of memory got used. Other than that, we didn't see any, kind of areas to watch out for. When we did fail over the SQL server, wasn't much difference. It's more one of those things of if you don't have the second SQL server there in place, there's nowhere to fail to. So things just come to a halt. So that was one of those areas where we decided we were going to converge more of the back-end databases for more of the app, the front-end roles onto a single set of servers and add a little bit more memory because it was more cost-effective for us. And with the edge failover, we didn't really see much of a difference when we did the failover. However, we will find out more about that when we actually throw more web load at it and we do the hardware load balancing in the future testing that we're doing. So, as we move to the next project, we're going to throw in some Gen 9 servers. Going to move using the Microsoft recommended in-place upgrade with paired pool. So we're going to kind of add the DR piece into the next one, which is kind of cool. So we're going to have the HA and DR. We're going to do the paired pool upgrade so that we can maintain our existing environment, build our new environment out on the Gen 9 servers, and then come back over and bring the Gen 8 servers up to Skype for Business. So we're going to put that in a white paper and share that with everyone, kind of, what was our experience in doing this in a lab that's been running for a while, and that we had some pretty good idea of what the performance looked like in the lab before we went to Skype for Business. In-place upgrade, it may or may not fit what you're trying to do. One of the things that in talking to the Skype for Business team we have found is that by going to the Silk protocol, the front end client, so the clients that are talking to the front end are doing more processing using the Silk codec than what they've previously had to do. So if you have some clients that are on some really old machines, you may want to look at upgrading those clients so that they have a good quality of experience. Like I said, Gen 9 servers. We are going to look at, with Scott's help of, he didn't really like our network architecture, but, we just found Scott fairly recently in the project, so we get to benefit from his experience in putting new, better, higher-end gear in place for that. I'm curious, how many people, when they do put things out in production, use the Lync stress and performance tool to test? Okay, just a couple. Okay. The reason that we asked is Microsoft was a little bit uncertain on what the timing was going to be of the availability for that tool. So we're trying to push them to help get that out there so that we can use that in our lab. And with that, I will hand it over to Jan, and she can pass the baton, as it were.
Thank you. Just a clicker. So we'll do this real quick. And the last thing Kevin mentioned is the fact that what is stymieing us is that Lync perf tool isn't really going to be usable against the Skype for Business server. So that's what's kind of holding us up, is we need a new tool, but Microsoft has yet to give a date when that new tool is available. So we're pushing hard on them to get that out and helping them understand the importance of actually having that tool available. So let me go here. So, yeah. Since we're between you and lunch, to make it quick, when you download the presentation, we put some live links in there on the resources to do more deep dive. The white paper itself is probably, what, Kevin, 60 some odd pages? Yeah, 60 pages, and, we tried to crack the whip on Kevin and get him to finish it in time for today, but, he needs another week or two, so, to wrap that up. So there'll be a link for that online. And just so you know, and again, as we mentioned in the beginning, one of the things, we derived a lot of this information from a lot of the stuff we do every day. I mean, we're involved pretty much across the board in anything Lync or Skype for Business does, the network aspects, and as Scott was saying, 68 to 80% of the quality of service, the quality of experience is the network. Well, the part Kevin talked to, what's the other 40 to 20%? It's the server. If the SQL backend overloads, it's not all the network. Network, as important as it is, it's really both of them working in harmony. So across the board, we do network assessment and design. We have experience with infrastructure. We pretty much own almost all the infrastructure parts internally, which has contributed to a lot of what we've learned. Phones, networks, and as I mentioned earlier too, we provide both. We have experience in both on-premise customer customized deployments as well as offering a managed service offering, so pretty much across the board. And one thing we do to pull it all together, we do run with our customers where we've learned a whole lot, is these transformation experience workshops. And I'm not sure how you approach your own deployment or if you're partners, how you work with your customers. What we found is the highest success factor comes from understanding the business problems first, setting milestones, and then deploying and against those milestones. So we try to map everything we do technically back to a business milestone. And so we will have people in our booth if anyone wants to talk a little bit more about how we do that and, how it would apply to you. There's people in the booth to talk about that. So, and if you want more information, anything, we included an email. It happens to be another person in networking, Jeff Bacchus at hp.com. So any other questions for any of us or anything about HP or anything about what's the new link to the white paper, send those on to Jeff and he will find us or find the right person at HP. And with that, I think, since we're kind of out of time, just future projects, I think we covered those in the presentation. We're upgrading our lab to Skype for Business, 5,000 users. And then we want to hear, again, either talk to Jeff or otherwise email him what would you like to see from us? We're also playing with how we're going to define a hybrid deployment. So whether that's a combination of Exchange online with a non-premise Skype for Business server, we're working on defining those scenarios right now. So what are the kinds of things you might want to do, you're seeing, or you might want us to test out for you? Because again, we're big, we own a lot of hardware, and we can put together these labs and do a lot of this. Because it benefits us, and hopefully it benefits all of you too. So with that, I think it's going to be lunchtime.
So thank you all very much for coming, and we really appreciate it.